Following Brexit, whatever we'll do will be a change of the status quo. The main discussion then becomes what are the consequences, given that during the referendum campaign of 2016, our then Home Office Secretary Theresa May argued in favour of remaining on a security basis. So the question now becomes, what will really change, and how ready are we to cope with it? Tactics opens our series on Europol by talking with one of the most recognizable figures on organized crime and terrorism and a global advisor of police forces, Professor Bill Tupman. Professor Tupman, good evening to you.
Hi.
Hi. Let's start off with first question on pan-European task forces. Basically, by the end of the year, British police forces will be able to participate in pan-European task forces, but not lead them. Is that a problem?
I mean, I think you're talking about joint investigation teams. Joint investigation teams were set up by the European Union to facilitate cooperation between countries. Having looked at the latest information, I don't think it is a problem. They have become a lot more relaxed about teams having an actual leader, and they are prepared to allow countries from outside the European Union to become members of a joint investigation team. The big problems will come with the judicial supervision of investigation. It's always been a problem. Most of the rest of Europe believes in judicial oversight of investigation. Mm-hmm. The UK has never believed in that. The UK has always believed that you let the police get on with it, and the courts then decide whether or not what they did was right. Mm-hmm. The rest of Europe actually likes the police to operate with either a prosecutor supervising them or a judge supervising them. You've got the two models, the North European and the South European. And the idea of the joint investigative team, Eurojust would overcome legal issues that might come up in the investigation. Now, the UK has never been that fond of Eurojust. For some reason, I think the UK has never really understood the nature of organised crime networks. They've always thought that you can prosecute successfully in the UK and in UK courts. The problem is the nature of organised crime today is that it exploits judicial differences in order to escape prosecution on a technicality. Mm-hmm. And I think this is where the problem will come, that the UK will find it difficult to get evidence from other European countries that is acceptable in a court of law. We will have to renegotiate mutual legal assistance, which the EU has successfully negotiated a treaty with the United States and treaties with Norway and Iceland. But given what the UK wants to withdraw from, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and sort out a new arrangement for mutual legal assistance. And I think some of the problem is going to be, an offence is committed. Where is it committed? Drugs are brought in through Coruña, and they are then transported to Amsterdam. They are then imported to the UK, which we now know is the biggest cocaine market in Europe. Okay, mm-hmm. So cocaine is now going to be coming to the UK, and we're going to find it more and more difficult to cooperate with the Spanish police force, the Dutch police force, and maybe the French police force too, into mounting a joint operation that will lead to a successful prosecution. Okay? But there's another snag here. The UK actually isn't that worried about prosecution anymore. The philosophy in the UK is it's very difficult to carry out a successful prosecution. It takes too long. By the time you bring everything to court, it's 2 years after the offence has been committed, and the networks have been committing further offences. So the UK now prioritises disruption. I don't think the rest of Europe finds that legally acceptable. It's very difficult to follow a strategy of disruption when you haven't got a clear legal framework in place for it. The UK has, you know how crazy the UK is. We have the Scottish system, we have the English system, we even have a separate system in Northern Ireland. The Scots enabled disruption 10 years ago. They've only ever brought 2 cases to trial under the Given Act. The UK followed them about 6 years later and still hasn't actually prosecuted under that act. So there are different philosophies here, I think, as well as different legal philosophies, different investigation philosophies. So how we bring all those together without having day-to-day cooperation is something that I think we're going to find challenging.
How do you think that might be able to happen? Because it does seem that data sharing, intelligence sharing, prosecution and investigation will be an issue. Do you think that there is?
There's a huge issue because the rest of Europe doesn't trust us on data protection. The UK's data protection legislation is not seen as adequate. The UK is not seen as reliable on financial crime, on money laundering, and on fraud. I mean, one of the first things that's going to happen is we're going to withdraw from the money laundering directives. And the money laundering directives are seen by Europol and the rest of European investigation as fundamental to it. If you're going to break organized crime networks, you have to follow the money. But to follow the money, you have to have legislation in place, and you have to actually believe in seizing assets. The UK's record on seizing assets is not that good. If you hear politicians talk, they'll tell you, oh, we've done this, we've done that, we've done the other. Self-finance. It was going to seize so many assets, it was going to be able to fund itself. It's never happened. And there is a suspicion, I think, across the channel that British banks speak louder than British police. Money is money. It doesn't smell. It's always good to have it. So it seems to me that there are different priorities.
Is there a plan on the table?
If I were... Sorry?
Is there a plan on the table right now to combat this?
I can't hear you.
Is there a plan on the table right now to combat all these challenges, do you think?
Not in the UK, no. I mean, I think the plan in the UK, I think if you talk to a policeman, they wish to continue the Treaty of Prum, or the convention. I can't remember whether it's a treaty. I think it's a treaty, and it's not pronounced Prum, it's Prum or something like that, which enables data transfer, enables data sharing. We don't like that. The European arrest warrant, we really don't like that, because British businessmen think that they can get away with speeding and come home and not have to pay the speeding fine. It's that stupid. It's that petty. The European Information Order, I mean, it's a system, isn't it? All these things are integrated. And I can tell you from reading the right-wing British press, they don't want the arrest warrant, they don't want the information order, and a lot of that is to do with rich people being allowed to behave as they like when they go abroad. I'm a cynic on all this, I need to say. Is there a plan? The police have a plan. The politicians, as far as I can see, object to that plan. How we get round that? Well, the good news is the police have always found a way. The law always ends up being changed to accommodate the police. They've been very good at changing that. So I think the networks that the police have set up, including the UK, over the past 10 years, will survive whatever happens with Brexit. Mm-hmm. And those networks will be used. The problem will be we can't prosecute successfully because the evidence can't be moved across borders. But as I said earlier, we like to disrupt. We think disruption is more successful. We don't really believe you can successfully prosecute an organized crime group.
Right. Finally, can we mitigate the losses from transnational cooperation with bilateral cooperation?
It may be. It may be. We would be better making a proper mutual legal assistance treaty with the EU as a whole. And you know what's going to happen. The first thing that will happen the minute the UK leaves all this is that the EU will introduce the European Public Prosecutor. They've been wanting to introduce the European Public Prosecutor since I first started writing about it in, I think, 2005, maybe earlier. And it makes sense. The European Public Prosecutor who will take on cross-national prosecutions and prosecute in national courts. The UK will not be part of that system, and that will be a further barrier to mitigating these sorts of problems. What's the central problem? The central problem is, will evidence be admissible in courts of different jurisdictions? In the EU, yes. Outside the EU, much more difficult. But we need to look at how this is being dealt with in the United States. If the United States can deal with it, I'm sure that the United Kingdom can.
Right. Professor Tupman, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.